Imagine a place where your nightmares become reality, where the line between the world of the living and the dead blurs. I've been there, and what I found, you wouldn't believe. Shadow Creek. The name itself whispered tales of a forgotten era, a place where time seemed to have taken a detour, leaving behind only echoes of what once was. Nestled deep within the desolate plains of the Midwest, it was a ghost town, a relic of a bygone boom, now a mere whisper on the wind. Once, it had been a bustling hub, vibrant and alive, but now only skeletal remains of buildings stood, like hollow eyes staring into the vast emptiness. Among the faded memories, one legend stood out, a dark and chilling tale that still clung to the air like a lingering fog. The story of the Shadow Creek Spectacle. It was a traveling circus, a grand spectacle of wonder and amazement, or so it seemed. They came to Shadow Creek one warm summer, promising thrills and illusions to the townsfolk. A massive tent sprang up overnight, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the town's rustic charm. The circus was a hit, a mesmerizing whirlwind of clowns, acrobats, and exotic animals. But then, on one fateful night, tragedy struck. Fire, a ravenous beast, consumed the tent, leaving nothing but charred remains and the chilling silence that followed. Every soul within the tent was lost, and overnight, both the circus and a good portion of the already dwindling town were gone. Now, years later, only whispers of the circus's dark fate remained. Ethan Hayes, a young journalist with a hunger for the truth and a healthy dose of skepticism, arrived in Shadow Creek. He'd stumbled upon the tale during his research, and something about it had piqued his interest. An article about the forgotten circus could be his big break. The town was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the creaking of old signs and the rustling of dry leaves. He found the town's only diner, a relic in and of itself, and slid into a booth. As he ordered coffee, he noticed a young woman sitting in a corner, her eyes fixed on a worn, leather-bound journal. Sarah Walker, a psychology student, had come to Shadow Creek for her own reasons, drawn by the same tales of the circus. Unlike Ethan, she was fascinated by the supernatural, by the stories that defied logic. She saw patterns where others saw chaos, a connection to a world unseen. When their eyes met, a spark of shared curiosity ignited, a silent agreement to unravel the enigma of Shadow Creek's shadowed past. The diner, with its faded neon sign and worn leather booths, became their impromptu meeting place. Over lukewarm coffee, Ethan and Sarah shared their reasons for being in Shadow Creek. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, saw the circus legend as a story, a potential headline. Sarah, however, saw something more, a lingering echo of a world beyond the veil of the ordinary. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they decided to explore the outskirts of the town. Jack Miller, an old-timer who quietly listened to their conversation in the diner, warned them not to go out at night. "Them stories ain't just stories," he rasped, his eyes filled with a deep, unsettling fear. "Some things are best left undisturbed." Ignoring the old man's ominous words, they ventured into the fields surrounding Shadow Creek. The air grew colder, a stark contrast to the warm day, and a thick fog rolled in, obscuring the already dim landscape. Following a barely visible path, they stumbled upon a clearing. The remnants of a circle, as if something had been placed there before, was the only thing that interrupted the overgrowth of weeds and wild grass. Suddenly, a faint melody drifted through the fog, a haunting tune that sounded like a distorted carnival waltz. Then, the impossible happened. From the depths of the fog, lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced and swayed. The melody grew louder, and a massive tent, its colors vibrant and otherworldly, materialized before their eyes. The Shadow Creek spectacle had returned. tent loomed over them, a beacon of light and sound in the desolate darkness. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a sense of anticipation and dread. The sounds of a carnival of laughter and music echoed from within, yet the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. They looked at one another, a silent question passing between them. The logical part of Ethan's mind screamed at him to run, to dismiss it as an elaborate illusion or a trick of the light. But the sight before him was too vivid, too real. Sarah, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement, stepped forward, drawn to the spectacle like a moth to a flame. "It's real," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing cacophony of the circus sounds. "It's really here." Ethan, despite his skepticism, felt a pull, an irresistible urge to uncover the truth behind the illusion. They were both trapped by curiosity. Taking a deep breath, they approached the entrance of the tent, the grand archway, illuminated by flickering lights. The air was thick with the scent of popcorn and cotton candy, mixed with something else, something metallic and unsettling. The show was about to begin. Stepping through the grand archway was like crossing a threshold into another dimension. The interior of the tent was a labyrinth of shadows and flickering lights, a stark contrast to the vast, empty fields outside. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread, yet the sounds of merriment and music filled the space, creating an unsettling dissonance. They wandered down a narrow corridor, the canvas walls whispering with unseen movements. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy was overwhelming, but underneath it, a metallic tang like blood lingered. Suddenly, a spotlight illuminated a small stage, and the show began. Clowns, their faces painted in grotesque smiles, performed acrobatic feats that defied human anatomy, their bodies twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. Their laughter echoed through the tent, high-pitched and maniacal. Next, a group of acrobats swung from trapezes, their movements fluid and graceful, yet their eyes were empty, their faces gaunt. They moved with an unnatural precision, as if controlled by invisible strings. The performances grew increasingly bizarre. Animals, their eyes glowing with an eerie light, performed tricks that seemed impossible. A lion jumped through hoops of fire, its roar replaced by a chilling silence. A troop of elephants danced in perfect synchronization, their movements mechanical and lifeless. As the show progressed, Ethan and Sarah noticed something disturbing. The audience, if there was one, was hidden in the shadows. Their presence, felt but unseen. The performers moved with a robotic precision, their faces devoid of emotion, their movements repeating in an endless loop. Jack Miller's warning echoed in their minds. As they watched, a sense of unease settled over them, a feeling that they were witnessing something deeply wrong. The joy and wonder of the circus were replaced by a sense of dread and horror. The metallic scent in the air grew stronger, and the laughter of the clowns turned into a cacophony of shrieks and whispers. Ethan and Sarah exchanged worried glances. "This isn't right," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "They're not alive. Ethan, they're not." Suddenly, a clown, its face painted in a grotesque smile, turned its gaze towards them, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It beckoned them forward, its smile widening into a sinister grin. The music swelled, the lights flickered, and the show took on a new, more menacing tone. Jack appeared seemingly out of thin air, grabbing them both by the arms. "You two need to get out of here now. This show is not for the living." His eyes darted around the tent, filled with terror. "They know you're here." Jack Miller, his weathered face etched with fear, pulled Ethan and Sarah into a shadowed corridor, away from the macabre spectacle. "We have to go," he urged, his voice trembling. "They've seen you. They won't let you leave." The corridor twisted and turned, a labyrinth of canvas walls and flickering lights. The sounds of the circus echoed through the maze, a cacophony of distorted music and maniacal laughter. As they hurried through the maze-like corridors, the environment around them began to shift, the very fabric of the circus warping into something more sinister. The cheerful circus theme morphed into a dissonant and ominous tune. Suddenly, a curtain closed behind them, separating them from Jack. They spun around, disoriented, the corridor they had just passed through vanishing into thin air. "Jack!" Sarah called out, her voice echoing through the empty space. But only the laughter of clowns and the distant roar of animals answered her. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, tried to maintain his composure. But the unsettling reality of their situation was beginning to seep into his consciousness. "We have to find him," he said, his voice firm, though a hint of fear lingered beneath. The corridor ahead split into two paths, each leading deeper into the labyrinth. They chose a path at random, their footsteps echoing through the silence. As they walked, the walls around them began to close in, the air growing thick and suffocating. Sarah, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fascination, noticed something strange. The canvas walls were no longer smooth but textured, like the skin of some grotesque creature. Suddenly, a mirror appeared before them, its surface rippling like water. Sarah, drawn to its reflection, stepped closer. The mirror showed her not her own reflection, but a vision of her deepest fears, her insecurities and anxieties magnified and distorted. She recoiled in horror, her breath catching in her throat. Ethan, witnessing her distress, tried to pull her away, but she was transfixed, trapped by her own terror. At the same time, Ethan found himself plunged into a maze of funhouse mirrors. Distorted reflections of himself stretched and contorted, mocking him with grotesque grins. The laughter of clowns echoed from all sides, their voices growing louder, more menacing. He felt a cold dread creeping up his spine, the sense of being watched, hunted. The clowns, their painted smiles now twisted into sinister grimaces, began to emerge from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Meanwhile, Jack was trying to find his way back to Ethan and Sarah. He knew the secrets of the circus, the hidden paths and illusions. But even for him, the ever-shifting labyrinth was a challenge. He'd worked at the circus when he was younger before the fire and had thought he knew every inch of it. Now, however, the circus had become a living thing, and it was hunting them. Every wrong turn he took seemed to lead him into a new, more frightening number. He found himself face to face with what appeared to be a menagerie. However, the animals were mere skeletons, their bones clacking together as they moved. "What have they done?" Jack whispered, his voice filled with dread. The funhouse mirrors shattered, and Ethan found himself back in a familiar, albeit distorted corridor. He heard Sarah's cries echoing down the hall. He ran toward her voice. Sarah had collapsed, still staring wide-eyed at the mirror, her breath shallow and rapid. Ethan reached her and pulled her away from the mirror's horrifying gaze. The image within the mirror shifted, its reflection now focused on Ethan's own. Fear, the image of his dead mother whispering his name in a mournful tone. Ethan shook his head, looking away. "We have to get out of here, Sarah," he said urgently, pulling her to her feet. "This place is playing with our minds." Suddenly, the walls around them dissolved, revealing a vast circular arena. The circus's main stage. The ringmaster, a figure shrouded in shadow, stood in the center, his voice echoing through the space. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the grand finale of our spectacle." His voice, smooth and sinister, sent chills down their spines. Jack emerged from another corridor, his face grim. "We're out of time." The ringmaster stepped into the light, revealing a gaunt figure with eyes that glowed like embers. He wore a tattered tuxedo, his face painted with a grotesque caricature of a smile. "You've come to witness the true nature of our show," he continued, his voice dripping with malice. "The power of the Shadow Creek spectacle is fueled by fear, by the essence of the living." He gestured around the arena, where the phantom performers now stood in a menacing circle, their eyes fixed on Ethan, Sarah, and Jack. "And you, my dear guests, will provide the next act." Jack stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You won't get away with this," he growled. "I know your secrets, Silas." The ringmaster, Silas, let out a chilling laugh. "Secrets? You think you know my secrets, old man? You were just a stagehand, a fool who thought he could escape his destiny." Jack revealed that Silas, obsessed with immortality, had orchestrated the fire, sacrificing the performers to fuel his dark magic. The ringmaster smiled, his eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. "Yes, I admit it," he confessed. "They were merely tools, pawns in my grand design, and now you will join them." The phantom performers began to advance, their movements swift and deadly. Ethan grabbed a discarded metal pole from a stage prop, while Sarah, drawing on her psychological insights, tried to understand the ringmaster's weaknesses. "You feed on fear," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "But what are you afraid of?" Silas sneered. "Fear? I am the master of fear." But Sarah had seen a flicker of something in his eyes, a glimpse of vulnerability. She realized that Silas's power was tied to the circus itself, to the illusions and deceptions he had created. "The show ends when the audience leaves," she said, her voice ringing out through the large tent. Silas's smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "Foolish girl," he hissed. "You know nothing of my power." But Sarah's words had planted a seed of uncertainty, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. Ethan, seizing the opportunity, charged forward, swinging the metal pole at the phantom performers. The first few blows passed through them harmlessly, as if they were made of smoke. But with each strike, Ethan focused his anger, his fear, channeling it into the pole. The ghostly figures recoiled, their forms flickering and distorting. Jack joined the fray, using his knowledge of the circus's hidden mechanisms to disrupt the illusions, triggering trapdoors and collapsing scenery. Sarah, meanwhile, focused on the ringmaster, her voice ringing out through the arena. "You're afraid of being forgotten, aren't you, Silas? You're afraid of fading away, of becoming just another ghost story." Silas's face contorted in rage, his eyes glowing with a furious intensity. He unleashed a wave of dark energy, sending the phantom performers into a frenzy. The arena became a whirlwind of spectral figures, their movements swift and deadly. Ethan and Jack fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Suddenly, Sarah noticed a pattern in the ringmaster's movements, a rhythm to his gestures, like a conductor leading an orchestra. She realized that his power was tied to the central spotlight, the focal point of the circus's illusions. If they could disrupt the light, they could break his control. She pointed to a series of pulleys and levers hidden behind a curtain. "Ethan, up there, those controls, break the spotlight." Ethan, dodging a spectral acrobat's attack, sprinted towards the controls. The phantom performers tried to intercept him, but Jack held them back, his aged body moving with surprising agility. Ethan reached the controls and, with a surge of adrenaline, pulled the main lever. The spotlight flickered, then shattered, plunging the arena into near darkness. The phantom performers screamed, their forms dissolving into wisps of smoke. Silas roared in fury, his power waning. The illusions began to unravel, the circus tents fading, the macabre decorations dissolving into dust. "No!" Silas shrieked, his voice filled with despair. "You can't do this! This is my show!" But his words were drowned out by the screams of the trapped souls, their voices finally free, finally at peace. The ringmaster's form began to flicker, his ghostly visage contorting in agony. He reached out to Ethan, his eyes pleading, then filled with malice. "If I am to fade, I'll take you with me." With a final surge of dark energy, he launched himself toward Ethan, a spectral figure of pure rage. Jack jumped in front of Ethan, taking the full force of Silas's attack. His body convulsed, then fell limp to the ground. The ringmaster let out a final agonizing scream, then vanished, his essence dissipating into nothingness. The circus, once a vibrant spectacle of horror, was gone, leaving behind only the empty clearing and the faint scent of smoke. The phantom performers were gone, their souls finally freed. Jack lay motionless on the ground. Ethan and Sarah rushed to his side, but it was too late. He had given his life to stop Silas, to end the Shadow Creek spectacle.